Marco,
Sean, where are we going?
we're going to San Francisco.
Ah, good. Because you said I'll pick you up, and I have said yes, but
I
I
know.
didn't know
I
where we
think
were going.
I think I let you know at the last minute you're on this
I
ride with me
know,
today.
I know. I'm always happy to go to San Francisco, though. So, what's going on there?
Well, it's a lot of things, but it's a conference hosted by OWASP. It's a global conference held in San Francisco. So as you know, I was in Lisbon with the crew there and had some really great chats. And I said, you know what, I want to do more with AppSec. So it's a focus for me, certainly through the rest of this year and probably into next year as well. Apps are a big part of everything we do in business and in life in general. And there's a lot of sessions and topics talking about how do we secure apps, how do we secure the data in them, how do we secure the transactions, how do we maintain privacy, how does AI impact all this stuff, and ultimately it all starts with what's in the software. At least from my perspective, and how secure are each of the components.
That's the difference between me and you. You want to know what is in the software. I want to know what happened after it.
You want to know?
what
I like to know what's
society.
in the recipe, and hopefully it tastes good. You just want to know does it taste good?
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, let's introduce our guest here.
I know. I'm thrilled. Cassie Crossley's been on the show a couple of times now. She's written a book. We've had her on for the book. We had a chat in Broadcast Alley at RSA conference. It's a pleasure, Cassie, to have you on again.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here, Sean and Marco.
Yeah, super fun. And this is part of, if folks haven't figured out, this is part of our Chats on the Road to OWASP Global in San Francisco. We're going to have a few chats from folks speaking there, a couple keynotes, and an update on the OWASP Top 10 for AI LLMs and a bunch of stuff. But today we're looking at software bill of materials, SBOMs, not bombs with a B at the end, but a bomb with a B at the front. Always, AI happens to have fun with that when it transcribes things. But anyway, Cassie, congratulations on getting a speaking spot in San Francisco. Can you give us maybe an overview for folks who aren't familiar with bill of materials in the software world? It's not unlike what you find on a label for food, perhaps, but a little more complicated. I don't know, maybe easier, and we just haven't figured it out yet. So kind of give us an overview of what SBOMs are, bill of materials, and how that's impacting how we operate and work and at home.
Sure. Well, I think that software bills of materials, they are something that as developers we've had for a long time. We kept track of what open source we were using, what licensing we were using, but in general, we never provided that to external resources. If you look at, for example, the Instagram About page, it actually lists the open source that they use within the product, and that is something that those that are running applications would like to know more about. And we saw this primarily come to the forefront with Log4j. People wanted to know, am I affected really quickly? And they would have scanners that could detect it. But for a lot of products, such as software products or even firmware, we have at Schneider Electric, we've got 15,000 plus intelligent products. A lot of them are firmware, which embedded software. And then, of course, we have mobile apps and cloud and on-premise software. So all of the various mixtures. But being able to, if you're at a company and you don't have scanning tools that can look to see if you're at least even using that library open source, let alone there are commercial libraries, closed source libraries that you wouldn't know. And so the software bill of materials provides that list. It can be what's called just the tier one, the first party list, third party list of just what I'm using, but software libraries can call other software libraries. So there's something called transitive dependencies, and that means I'm dependent on something. And so software bills of material are much more complicated. So for example, if you're looking at a recipe list and it has a recipe, an ingredient that has one component, but that component can be made up of other components. Sometimes that information is not detailed out even on those ingredients. And so software bills of material, are you going to just have a list like a PDF, but there's really two main machine readable formats called CycloneDX and SPDX. So I'm going to be talking about how our company leverages those at the OWASP AppSec event.
It's kind of like, how far back do you go? Right? It's kind of like, okay, well, to go at the Big Bang, we're all made of the same stuff of the universe, but do we really need to know that to cure something? Or so where do you think is enough to go back and have this list of related development?
Sure. Well, I think the more you know, the better informed you can potentially be. So for example, let's just take, it wasn't a cyber event, but let's just take the CrowdStrike. And for those that were having their systems go down, they were working with these third-party systems that they probably did not create, and they were using CrowdStrike on those systems. So what kind of transparency did you, if you are buying a baggage handling system and they're using CrowdStrike? Because you asked them to keep it secure, and so they did. But they just didn't, in that case, you don't know what those additional dependencies. So I think it's important for us to understand both our third party, but also fourth party and above. You're not just your tier 1 suppliers, but potentially your tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers, because we're very interconnected in the world. And that's what the software bill of materials like. At the moment, I don't have an SBOM for the Microsoft.NET DLLs or the Oracle Java. So they could be using open source, and I don't know that. It's compiled binary. So, where are we going to, go further for that transparency? I think it's important for that visibility and to better manage risk.
So your session is called or entitled The Missing Link, How We Collect and Leverage SBOMs. So I want to hone in on the .NET just as one example. So in that world where we have no idea, right, what's inside, maybe some idea, but not completely, how do organizations kind of factor that in? To me, that's many missing links underneath.
Yes.
So do we identify that, assign some risk level? Is there a standard risk level that we can assign, or is it based on individual organizations' risk appetite? And then what do? Do we put additional controls or other mitigating factors in the development process, the deployment process, the operating environment? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions that you just put in there, Sean.
You have 20 minutes.
Let's look at it from the world of a product developer. Having that visibility when you're making that decision whether or not, so let's just say you're starting new, of using some open source, and it may have some additional open source it calls. That's really important decisions that we need to take now, that before it's like, oh, it works. But now you have so many supply chain attacks. I mean, just for, the revival, hack and things like that, where people are replacing old PyPy libraries that were deleted with new libraries. So all of this, there's risk that you're bringing in. I like to say developers are essentially, a doctor with a scalpel without any training at this point. There is a lot that they can do, but a lot of damage that can be caused. And without having better information to make those risk-based decisions, you might make a wrong choice. So in the world of software bill of materials, so let's say I was going to buy a library from somebody to include in a product. And I ask them for, if it's compiled, but if I've seen the source code and I have that, I can have some visibility and I can do my own research. There's not a one-way-fits-all. OpenSSF has a scorecard, but there are ways to get around better scoring of open source. Any brand new open source that is released, I would be very hesitant without doing a lot of risk evaluation, scanning, reviewing of the code if it's less than 1 year old and not being leveraged in other places. And that's one of the benefits of an SBOM. Let's just say in our world, I can see with my large product base with the SBOMs collected, I can see which open source we're leveraging quite a bit. So I can identify and watch for, key areas. We've seen it a lot with OpenSSL, right? I mean, there's just been numerous vulnerabilities that have been released over the years, and having that library of which products are using OpenSSL is very valuable. And that's sort of that missing link. Is before being dependent on that product team, we're also, as a risk and governance group, able to look at, which product set, is this risk. We see this with commercial products too. There are some commercial products that are more geared toward, let's say, real-time operating systems or using embedded Linux. So knowing which product sets are using that gives us a quick idea. Even Codesys, which is a commercial library, it can be used in certain types of products. So we're able to leverage and understand deeper without going to, we've got hundreds and hundreds of product teams and going to them every single time about something or a question. When I have that information that's available in software bills and materials, is really being able to reduce. They can focus on what they're working on. And when it looks like something we do need to ask for more detail of whether or not they are affected, because just because you have a library doesn't mean that you're affected. Because there could be mitigating controls, like you mentioned. There could be what we call backporting patches. So if I have version 7, but version 8 had a patch for a security fix, I could potentially bring that patch into version 7. I could have branched that software and removed a lot of the extra code that I didn't need. So there are many reasons why just because you have that label of that library could mean you're not affected by a certain vulnerability. And again, we saw that in the log4shell, log4j, where there was actually 2 CVEs, and if you stand on your one leg and tap your head and rub your belly, you might have been affected, but the other side you weren't. So there's a lot of a validation that dev teams in general still have to do.
So one question for me, like you work for Schneider's, is a big corporation, and I can see resources that are available, a team to go and dig deep into these and patch. And I'm thinking, like, the smaller company, they may just rely on this list, which I think is necessary, but is there a tier 1 and a tier 2 of how in depth you can go? Maybe a third-party assessment solution that could help protect and provide this to those that don't have the huge resources that you may have?
Sure. I work with startups, all the time, both as suppliers, but customers too. From a software bill of materials, let me just say, this is something that any dev team can implement. And those with a more modern pipeline, more modern CI/CD process and build pipeline, they can easily find projects or something that can tie in and create those software bill of materials so that they can provide it to their customers. So overall, they have, let's say, a better advantage than those that have had build cycles that might be, a decade or more old, like in my world. But in the consumption and the risk factor, so let's take a look at, I like to use the example of water utilities. They're definitely underfunded from a resource and IT and OT perspective. And, they're not going to go find a service to be able to leverage. So we are, as a critical infrastructure provider, we provide those SBOMs to customers, and there are free tools. There's something called Dependency Track that they can actually import that software bill of materials. However, it's not the easiest. There are some other ways that people are going to be ingesting those, but you can just actually take the SBOM and look at an XML viewer and just do a search. Like if I had them all, all of my SBOMs from a bunch of different companies, I could put them all in a folder, and the moment, a new log4j, version whatever comes out, at least I know where I might have an impact. So it's really, I love this example that a CISO for a electrical utility gave me an example. He goes, I have to know if I need to put eyes on a dial. And what that means is he has to know, should he focus his intention, may not have the answer, but if there's a potential risk. So a lot of what I see is that even just asset management, noting whether or not those assets are internet facing, internet connected, not just connectable, because you've got lots of OT products that are within the, firewall, segmented off or whatever, but just knowing which ones are internet facing is really important. That's where you should be prioritizing. So looking even at separating out those, if I was at a very small company, separating out the SBOMs from the internet facing applications versus the internal, I've already done a super easy risk management to say, those are the ones I need to consider patching and upgrading and finding out. And there is something called that we're working on as an industry called VEX, which is the Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange. And what that would do is it would say these two Log4j CVEs, we are affected or not affected, or we're looking at it. We're investigating it. And eventually, it's really hard right now. It's think of all the thousands of then objects just for Log4j. I would have had about 256,000 records because of all the different SBOM versions and everything. But as a simple way to just manage this, having those SBOMs and that visibility, it's not perfect, but it will get you somewhere to know the risk. So, I think there are definitely ways that you can manage it even at a small company level. Now, getting those SBOMs from large corporations is still a difficult task. It's not mandatory that they provide it. Even the FDA has required SBOMs now to be provided, but only to them. It's not mandatory that you provide it to the hospitals. So, there's a ways to go whether or not your supplier or manufacturer is willing to give you that information.
So I asked the wrong question. Should I ask the way around?
Well, there's no wrong question and no lack of questions. That's for sure. It's a topic that's intriguing to me, and it's one that the government invests in heavily. I know CISA is doing quite a bit in it. I was actually chatting with Alan Friedman this morning, who focuses on this quite a bit. I think if you say SBOM, Alan pops out of the woodwork and shows up. But
That's right.
he's at CISA event talking about this. I'm gonna catch up with him in a week or so and get an update from him as well.
Yeah, but we have the SBOM-arama in Denver. I'll leave it for tomorrow afternoon.
There you go. So kind of a double event coverage. So you'll be there with Alan and others interested in this. But this is about OWASP Global AppSec San Francisco. Your session is the missing link, how we collect and leverage SBOMs. It's on Thursday, September 26th. What can people expect? Some insights from what you do, what you actually implement.
Yeah, it's, again, we're large, but this is something, what I'm demonstrating to everyone is how we've changed our mode. And really, I was impacted from contracts that came in from utilities back in 2020. So in January of 2021, I required software bills of materials from all of my product teams and releases. And as I mentioned, this is not hard to really do if you have a more modern pipeline. So I talk about how we've modified our work and our flow and everything that's needed to be able to do that. But then I also talk about how we're leveraging it for vulnerability management, both for the vulnerability management that we provide to customers, but also moving toward the vulnerability management and working with our third-party suppliers, being able to go to them and take their details. With open source, it's quite a bit harder. There's, just the who's in charge of the project and the committers, but we do buy commercial libraries and we do, commercial source code. So we're leveraging this overall platform that we're doing. And, what it does is it shows that not only are we doing it internally, but also the value of bringing this together so that when a customer requests one, we have it available.
Good stuff. I'm excited to hear how that goes, and I'm sure you'll have a packed room full of folks interested in this. It's a key part of what we do in terms of app development and delivery and the broader ecosystem, right? Everybody's using apps and libraries and APIs now even for tons of stuff. So Global AppSec 2024 in San Francisco, September 23rd through the 27th at the Hyatt Regency. I love the OWASP community. They do great work, and these conferences are a tremendous way for bringing people together and having conversations and meeting folks like you who've put the work in to understand how we work through some of the challenges that we face as a community. So I encourage everybody to attend and definitely catch Cassie in her session and afterwards. And Marco, lots more coming.
Lots more coming, a lot of planning. Subscribe to the conference and event coverage called also On Location with Marco and Sean, or Sean and Marco, depending on what the main topic
who you
is.
like
but
better.
Usually we try to go together. So although I didn't get to go to Portugal,
You didn't get to go
I'm
to
upset
Lisbon,
about that.
You should be. You should be. It was a great event. Great event. I had a lot of good chats there.
We'll have other opportunity to travel and either cover virtually or in person. And Cassie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
And safe journey to SBOM and to Global AppSec. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.